together 2 podcasts. We'd encourage you to go to the Pause Wellness website. And at the end of this session, we encourage you to fill out the evaluation. There's a QR code in the book, and that just gives us information. So next year when we do this, we know what to expect. So just an introduction of Julie. As a marriage and family therapist in Providence, Utah, Julie is passionate about mental health and helping people build healthy relationships. She has worked as a therapist at Cache Valley Counseling for over 6 years. She specializes in the treatment of couples, depression, and anxiety. Her primary therapeutic models are emotionally focused therapy and internal family systems. She is a trauma-informed therapist. Julie earned her Bachelor of Science in Family and Consumer and Human Development and her master's degree in marriage and family therapy in 2015 from Utah State University. She loves God, family, the outdoors, and chocolate. I like that one. That's good. She and her husband of 44 years, congratulations, that's awesome, have 5 married children and 19 plus. Is there more on the way? Within the month. Okay, grandchildren. Her passions include hiking, gardening, and backpacking with family. And she gets quite obsessed watching her flowers grow. Julie is no stranger to her own emotional health challenges, and she speaks openly about her journey to wellness. She and her husband currently work together as directors of the Bear River Communications Council, whose focus is to collaborate efforts in civic, interfaith, and nonprofit organizations for the betterment of our communities. So we welcome Julie today.
Okay, so it says that I speak openly about my own experience, so I will start with my own experience. I was 28 years old and a young mom. We were living in the Portland, Oregon area, and my husband was busy, and I was president of our church's little youth population group, and my father-in-law passed away, and my husband was just started grad school. We just had a lot of things on our plate at that time. And I was walking up the stairs one evening, and I just collapsed on the stairs. And I started shaking uncontrollably, had no idea what was going on, completely lost my ability to walk and to talk. And so, of course, stroke is the first thing that came to my mind at 28 years old. I'm like, well, that would be really fun. But my husband rushed me to the emergency room. I ran all the tests, did all the things, and then I got mad. Because on the release slip, they had written across there, my diagnosis was depression. And I'm like, okay, now that does not match. I'd grown up in in my family with a sibling with horrific mental health challenges that led into drugs and darkness and deep unhappiness and leaving school. And I thought, of all the things in the world, I don't have that. But I did, and thus began my journey. And because of that, I am here. Being in the trenches with my own experience has carved out a place for the realities and the challenges, but also the hope that we can get help with mental health issues. My personal mission in life is to bust the stigma around mental health. To get to the point of the day that you and I can go in for a mental health checkup as comfortably as we take a child for a sports physical before they play on a team or before a well child check. We don't think anything's wrong with them. We want to make sure they're healthy, right? It's a preventative strategy. Can you imagine the day where the stigma is gone that we can have a relationship checkup, particularly a couple dynamic husband-wife checkup, because it's the heart of all family existence, is the relationship between partners. We're coming. Venues such as Pause are helping that happen. And when they ask me to speak, I'm like, I will say anything. Well, anything. I won't swear, but I will. I'll open my voice. I want to make this happen. And so about 8 years into my journey in the Portland, Oregon area. I'd been through therapy with 2 different therapists and had gone all the route of medications. And someone had just said, the most important thing you can ever do is get an exercise program. And I'm like, I have 4 little humans, and I'm with them all day long, and you want me to, like, just go get my heart rate up? I get my heart rate up just keeping David alive. He's like Dennis the Menace. It was the best advice I ever had, because exercise is nature's best antidepressant. And it's the one thing your body and your mind does not want to do when you're in a state of depression, but it's probably the most important thing you can do. And so I began that program, but I was driving through the freeways of Portland one day, and believe it or not, it was a clear day. I could actually see the sun, and I could actually see Mount Hood, which is Oregon's highest peak, which my husband summited a number of times. And that's how I know God protects his people, because people die on that mountain all the time. And he came back with all of his little scouts that almost fall off ledges every day, and they all made it on this glacial mountain. And so as I came out of this tunnel on the freeway, it was like a metaphorical moment of my own experience. And I'm like, I have come out of a very dark place. And then I said to God, I will do whatever it takes. If I can help one person out of this hellhole that I've been in, you have got me. And you better watch out what you promise to your higher power, if you have one, because he'll make you good on that offer. And I began speaking. I just volunteered to talk anywhere I could. At the Moms Club of Portland, a lady came up to me afterwards, and she's like, so, are you a psychotherapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist? And I'm like, well, lady, I'm a mom with 4 little children. I have 1 year of college, and I've been in hell. That's why I can talk to you. I didn't say it quite that way, but that's my message to her, that our lived experience can bless someone else's life. And so as we talk about managing anxiety and depression, I didn't say conquer them. I didn't say eliminate them. I said understanding. Oh, I didn't say manage. Making sense of them, because sometimes they don't totally go away. Do you know I have banished both my depression and anxiety multiple times? I have booked them one-way tickets to Siberia with a no-return policy. I sent all the suitcases, all the luggage that goes along with mental illness on those flights, and bless their hearts, they book flights back, and they come to the Dymock house in Paradise. They don't even knock. They just come in and they unload all of their baggage in our lives. So the good thing about that is I had to learn to be very open with my family. We have 5 children, and they all know what happens when mom has a meltdown or a panic attack. They're all trained. We're having Thanksgiving, invited our neighbor to Thanksgiving for the first time. I totally shut down. I do that often when I cook. Some people love to cook, sends me into outer space. That and sewing. And so I could just see I was just like shutting down, going into that mode. And so our son David is hilarious. He was about 16. He's like, okay, charades, everybody. Mom can't talk, so we're just going to guess what she needs. Jen, turkey. You check the turkey. Heather, you mash the potatoes. Ash, you check on the pies. Jason, you help set the table. And I'm like, yes. And then we put our guest next to my husband, who's sitting here, because he had words and could talk, and I couldn't. And so we've just had to have a very open family system about mental health. Now think about your own situation. Can you talk about those things comfortably? Can you own the need? Can you be honest about it? It's okay if you can't at this point, but my dream and my goal is that we can create dialogue in our homes and with our children to not make it a shameful, awful, terrible thing, but something that just happens to us in the course of human existence. And we're kind of in an epidemic right now with anxiety particularly, and we're going to watch a video clip in a minute of what Pixar did to address that. So the agenda for today is going to be to understand what a part is and what it is doing for you. We're going to talk about who's driving your bus. All of my clients have seen my little school bus. Using analogy that we ought to be the bus driver, and that our parts get on. We might have a critic part. We might have an anxious part. We might have a perfectionist part that are passengers on the bus. If they can be respectful and collaborate, we can drive okay. But you may know that some people on buses don't behave very well, particular children, and the bus driver has hers back to all those passengers, and sometimes misbehavior takes place. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to meet your core self, which is your highest, best self. Jody Moore talked about that today. And we'll hopefully get to talk about helping yourself and others. And then I'll give a 5-minute space for questions and answers. In the last workshop, I got some great questions, so be thinking. Okay, so Pixar did it best. How many of you seen either of the Inside Out movies? Okay, and the second one came out this summer? Okay, I had clients come back, and they're like, it was before I had seen it, and they're like, Julie, you can't believe this, but I was like I was sitting in a therapy session. Like, and when anxiety is at the control panel, and it's all yellow, and it's spinning like crazy out of control, that is my life with anxiety. So I was really excited when my husband and I got to see it, and I'm like, they did such a great job doing that. And I love, they said, the description of the first one, Pixar's Inside Out movie, a major emotion picture. And meet the little voices inside your head. That's the easiest, simplest way that I can describe parts to you. And thank you, Pixar, for being some scientifically researched, documented thing of how our brain works and how to put it into a movie. Do you mind getting that ready? Other clients came back and said, I just cried through the whole film. I just could relate so much with anxiety. And that's the epidemic we're facing, and we need to help one another. So let's watch it, see what happens. Oh, not the whole film. Sorry, I didn't bring popcorn for that much, but. I don't see a red. Oh. Up a finger. Okay, it doesn't want to do that.
This is Joy. Live in Riley's mind. Make some noise. Fatness is in the house. It's Hanger.
Let me at him. We gotta get our mouth guard, people.
Fear. No, that's not Alice. Disgust. Glad to have her on our team. Our little girl's growing up so fast.
Ow. Sorry. It should be nothing but smooth sailing.
Hello. I'm anxiety. Where can I put my stuff?
A new emotion.
Oh, I'm sorry. We wanted to make such a good first impression.
What do you mean, we?
I'm envy.
Look at your hair. Oh, yeah, not happening.
That's on we.
On what?
It's what you would call the boredom.
What's your name, big fella?
That's embarrassment.
Welcome to headquarters, embarrassment. Oh, we're doing a fit. No. Oh, nope, going high. Oh, you got a real sweaty palm there, buddy.
Look, we all have a job to do. I plan for the future.
You want to sit with us?
These girls are so cool. We can't let her know we're excited.
I got this.
Joy, I'm just curious. Maybe I could.
Thank you.
help.
Not now.
Yeah. That's not gonna haunt us for the rest of our lives at all. I know change is scary.
Let's do this.
Hey, Riley! But we need new friends or we'll be totally alone in high school. Out with the old, in with the new. Riley's life requires more sophisticated emotions than all of you.
You can't just bottle us up.
We are suppressed emotions.
Let Operation New Riley begin. You aren't packed yet?
I'm the worst. Well, that's a preview of the next 10 years.
Come on. Riley needs us. Have I ever steered you wrong before?
Many times.
What is that? It's the sarcasm.
Sarcasm. Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys. Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys.
Wow, those guys are jerks. Wow, those guys are jerks.
All right, I invite you to turn to someone sitting next to you and talk about what you see, what you thought, what you noticed about that. Ready, go. finish up in the next couple seconds there. One of my favorite lines in that trailer is, "We all have a job to do." And that's what our parts do. And we're going to talk about what a part is and how to understand it and how to make some sense of what sometimes seems like chaos, right? Everyone in that picture or in that motion picture film had an important job to do. I love ennui. It's the boredom, kind of that apathy. And if you've ever had children say, "I have nothing to do," I'm like, here's my list. Pick anything and start, But sometimes that's a part. Okay, so here's Dr. Richard Swartz, who grew up in an atheist/agnostic family on the East Coast. His father was a physician, and Richard became a marriage and family therapist at a time when our field was pretty young. And he began practicing and started to notice that clients began to talk about this part. And he's like, "I didn't learn anything about parts in my graduate program. What are they talking about?" He was doing an outcome study on bulimic eating disorder females and noticed that they would say things like, "Well, this eating disorder is so overwhelming, it just runs my life, but there's this part of me that thinks that I could get better." And he's like, "What are they talking about?" He was working with gang members on the west side of Chicago, and that's a difficult life. It's hard to get in, hard to get out, full of violence and darkness and secret codes and just drugs. It just sounds like I've been in a gang. But he said he would meet with these young gang members, and they would say, "It's such a horrific life, and it's so dangerous. But there's a part of me that thinks there's something better out there." And so literally over the last 45 years, Dr. Swartz has developed internal family systems from what he learned from his clients. And he described it that because it's like our parts are like a little family inside our brain of communicating methods that have important information to give to us. Other words that we might say are our internal dialogue, our self-talk. Our daughter Ashley, who's expecting our 20th grandchild within the month, look at that, I act like I'm having the baby. We love being grandparents. She came home from second grade one day and she's like, "Mom, I just learned the coolest word. It's called metacognition. It means you can think about your thinking." I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I hadn't gone back to college yet, so I didn't know about metacognition. I said, "Tell me what it means." "Mom, we are some of the few of all the species on the planet that can observe our own thinking. We can think about what we're thinking about." Well, she ended up becoming a writer and a publisher because words are her thing, but I became pretty fascinated with it. So let's do some word study here. In Greek, the word meta means higher or beyond. And in Latin, the word cognitio means thinking, perceiving, or understanding. That is, we can think beyond the normal process of thinking. So just an experience with that right now. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, I invite you to do that. And just take a breath in. Just inhale. And exhale. And I would like you to think about your right pinky toe. Now observe yourself moving your attention to think about your left elbow. Now can you think about your right shoulder, your left ring finger, your eyebrows? And now think about observing what you're feeling in this moment, sitting in this room, on that chair. See if you can even maybe observe yourself as if you were from above looking down at yourself. Can you see yourself sitting there? Now let's take a breath in. Inhale. And exhale. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. some people were so comfortable in the last one. I sound like, I'm like, go for it. I'm sure it was a busy morning getting here. Take a breather. That part needs some care. Yeah. Okay, raise your hand if you were kind of able to visually take yourself to those places. Could you picture your right toe? Keep your hands up if you could. Yeah. There's a small population among us who can't visualize. So right now, see if you can visualize what an apple looks like in your mind. And now visualize a banana and visualize peeling it down and taking a bite. And so Dr. Schwartz is one of those people who can't visualize in his brain, but he knows that people can. So if you can't visualize, I have a colleague who can't do that. She's like with that meditation and mindfulness stuff, I see nothing, it's like black. So, but if you can have that ability to observe your own thinking, observe yourself, we can become better aware and really make a difference with our mental health by noticing what our parts are doing. Okay, let's go on. Okay, what we know about parts. And what I know about this presentation is that the slide deck will be made available afterwards. But you're welcome to snap pictures, you're welcome to take notes. The more active you are in your learning process, the more you're going to remember. So whatever works for you is great. So what we know about parts is that they have good intentions and are trying to help us in some way. Some of my clients do not agree with that. They're like, okay, when I'm so depressed I cannot even get out of bed, and I can't even make breakfast for my children, I don't think that part has good intention, and I don't see how it's trying to help us in some way. But we'll talk a little more about that. There are no bad parts. That's Dr. Schwartz's most recent book, meaning that all parts are trying to help in some way. They just get burdened and carry heavy loads, and our job is to help unburden them from their responsibility that they're working too hard. We need to allow them to stop working overtime. Parts can carry burdens or take on protective roles, and we'll talk about that in another slide. I love this next one. Creating a healthy relationship with our parts is an effective way to release them from burdens. So back to the eating disorder clients that Dr. Schwartz was working with in his early career. He had a client who was working with, had a lot of self-harm, was cutting herself, and he said, I was so determined to get her to commit to not cut between now and the next session. He said, I manhandled that self-harm part, and I told it couldn't do that anymore, and she finally agreed that she would not cut. She came back to the next session with a gash across her cheek. And he said, all right, I give up. You cannot force a part to leave a person's system until it is heard and understood and you have communicated with it to understand why it's there in the first place. And he began to just change. I just love how this was a developmental thing of him discovering because of what people told him. It's so inspiring to me. And that's how I feel in my work as a therapist. I trust the inner process of every client, that they are gifted with internal guidance. They live with themselves 168 hours a week, and I get 50 minutes a week. And so I call upon their internal strengths, their wisdom, their guidance. My job is just to help them access that. And when their core self gets online, wow. I literally just become an observer of the most incredible healing. But I've had clients tell me they haven't heard from that inner part in many years, that it's lost. One person said, I don't think I ever had one. But Dr. Schwartz disagrees. The last line, the most valuable part is our core self. Everyone has this part. Sometimes it just gets buried. Back up a little bit. Some are very young parts called exiles and can be frozen in time. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. And our protector parts, our managers and our firefighters show up to protect the exiles. Questions, comments about that? All right, we'll do more of it then. Thank you. All right, so all parts are welcomed. I took this diagram from a colleague and friend, Shani Jensen, and messaged her last night and said, thank you for letting me do this. Use your slide. All parts are welcomed. So our true self, and what I call is our core self, different people call it different things, different worldviews, religions have different names for it. We'll go over that in a minute. At the core of every human, what Dr. Swartz called are our 8 C's. And as I read these, I want you to think of maybe a time when you have had this, character trait or behavior in your life. The ability to be compassionate, to be calm, to be curious. I use curiosity all the time with clients. When they're so upset, man, I lost my temper, I yelled, I got out of control, I was so angry, the kids left in such disarray because of my anger and my upset this morning, I just feel so terrible about myself. And instead of getting on that bandwagon that their critic is beating them up, I said, let's be curious about that. Let's slow that down and find out what was going on, what was happening inside you, what were some of those triggers. And that curiosity opens up genuine discovery. So beautiful. The ability to be courageous, creative, connected, clear, to have clarity, and to be confident. So those parts may not show up all those time, those traits, but when you get in that moment, be curious about it. It's like, what was I doing that created that? For me, being in nature is probably the number one place where I connect with my core self. I just have this amazing connection that happens to me that doesn't happen anyplace else. Even if I can exercise outside, it's different than working out in my basement, because there's fresh air and there's beautiful things. And so finding situations that help you get connected to your true self or your divine self, whatever you want to call it. Okay, exiles, frozen in time parts. Get ready for this, ladies and gentlemen. Carrying feelings. These are heavy hitter feelings. Shame, fear, anxiety, panic, overwhelm, sadness, depression, isolation, feeling broken, slow, stupid, ugly. Exiles are usually young parts that have developed from early life experiences that say, I gotta lock this down in the basement. Actually, some trauma memories are stored in a different fashion in the brain than regular memory processing. And sometimes the trauma has been so intense that it's like buried with a lock and key. And you're walking along in your life, and all of a sudden something triggers something from way down below, and it shoots up in your life with all the feelings. For example, if a person has been sexually assaulted, they're walking down a street, they pass someone who kind of resembled the person who assaulted, or they smell their cologne, or maybe it was cigarette smell, or maybe it was from a certain race or culture. That can trigger that. We call that PTSD, and it can send you down, and everything that was hidden down and locked away in that exile box comes shooting up in the moment. So that's why war vets have flashbacks if they hear a motorcycle going off or fireworks in the summer. They can be back in the trenches with gunfire going on around them. Trauma work is some of my most favorite work. And if I live long enough, I'm planning on it. Excuse me, I have many miles to go. I'm going to be a trauma certified therapist. Right now I am trauma informed. So there you go. All right, our managers, the next two columns are what we call protectors, and they come along to protect those tender, vulnerable parts that are locked away. Managers help us be busy. They proactively prevent us from feeling the pain of the exile. So just notice sometimes if you might have a protector here: people pleaser, doubter, a perfectionist, controller, wanting to take control of all situations. That was something my husband pointed out in early on. It's like, Julie, you have a high need to control. I'm like, I do. But then I understood that it was protecting a lot of fear from a lot of unrest that happened in my childhood. That if I can control it, then it's going to be safe. A spiritualizer, well, if you would just like fast 5 times a week, and if you would just read your scriptures, or if you would commune with your higher power all day long, everything would be better. Have you heard that? Just read scriptures and pray more. It'll take care of everything. Yeah. Those can be very good things, but sometimes we need a little more help. The critic, boy, how many of you have an internal voice that criticizes you or tears you down or gets after you? If you're not raising your hand, you're not being honest. No, sorry. No, I've had a couple clients say they really don't have that negative self-evaluation, but most people, man, I sure messed up there. Oh, I totally forgot to do that. And how many times have I tried to conquer that? Why are you even trying? I mean, how long have you been trying to lose those 5 pounds? Loser. Jody Moore talked about that internal voice today. Denial. Life is so good. I'm great. I am just so fantastic. Everything is just great. I'm like, everything is just awesome. Denial is a nice place to live for a minute, but it doesn't help us get healthy. Being overly busy and intellectualizing. Do you know that studies show that if you exercise at least 20 minutes and get your heart rate up in your target heart zone, that it's going to reduce your depression by 33.3%? Now get out there and do it. Intellectualizing and getting ourselves. Have you ever had anybody do that to you? Telling you just how to solve the problem, how to get better? Okay, the firefighters, if you look at that list, they're mostly behavioral things. They are reactive strategies to douse the pain of the exile when triggered. And I work with all kinds of behavioral issues, drinking, eating, acting out sexually, pornography, drugging, overspending. Spending is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can become. I had one client a long, long time ago who got about 25 Amazon packages per day, and she never even opened them. She just make a stack in her haul for the next packages coming the next day. There is endorphin, there's dopamine rush. It's a pleasure hormone when you click buy or purchase something. Can be kind of hard on your checkbook, though, if that one's out of control. Dissociation, which simply means checking out, not being present, zoning out. It can go a whole range of dissociation. Self-harm, rage, blame shifting, avoiding, becoming suicidal or homicidal, and self-sabotage. You're setting yourself up to fail. Isn't this fun? People have asked me sometimes, you like to work with people who come in and tell you about their depression and how sad? And I'm like, yes, I do. Because I know what it felt to be like there, and sometimes it still hits me. But there are answers, and there's help. And we must bust the stigma that it's a bad thing. We must help one another get help. And I'm so glad you're here. I was so thrilled to be asked to speak, and I attended last year, and like, we need 10 of these a year, and we need to double the attendance at conferences like this to speak about it so that we can get help and normalize the reality that this happens to us. Okay, I'm done with that soapbox. Let's go to the next one. All right, so sometimes our parts can act like passengers on a bus, and I mentioned that a little bit. And sometimes they behave and act like well-behaved children on a bus. But if you've been on a bus, you know sometimes that spitwads are thrown and things are thrown out of a window, and that our parts can act quite unruly. And if we don't give the proper attention to why our part is there, it's going to act like a toddler and have a tantrum or amp up until you listen to it. Just like the client who came back with the gash in her face. You can't force it away. It's going to get your attention one way or the other. Yes?
No, go for it. Oh, just curious, like, how do you get rid of that part? Like, in the end, what did he do to help her stop self-harming? Just curious.
You shoot the part. No, I'm just kidding. Don't write that down. You develop a healthy relationship to it. Great question. In other words, and I'll tell a story that happened to me here just a while ago. Wayne, would you just forward that to the backpacking pictures? I love being in nature. I love, as I mentioned, backpacking, and because of my husband, we have summited the highest peak in Utah a number of times. And so over Labor Day, my son was going with his wife and 4 children and invited us along. And the little 3-year-old carried her pack, like a big majority of those 8 miles. And then everyone else carried her the rest of the time, but it was a big thing. So here we are at Notch Lake, and it's just pristine. We had the entire lake pretty much to ourselves over this weekend. And I'm just breathing it in and taking it in, the smell, and the boys were fishing, and we just had such a great time. And then it came time to leave on Monday morning. As you can see, some people are loaded up with their packs on their back. And eventually I got there. But I had a massive meltdown, like complete coming apart with anxiety. And just similar, I've had them throughout my life. It just kind of seems to be on my plate. Did I tell you I ship them away and they come back? I mean, did I say that in this presentation? Okay, I'm on my second go around. If you hear the same story 10 times, we just say, hey, lady, we already heard that one. What was I saying? Oh. Oh, yeah, total meltdown. I could feel an anxiety attack coming on, and I got pretty mad at myself. I'm like, here I am doing something that is so meaningful to me. We are just spending time. We're having good talks with these 4 kids and loving their parents, and we're all eating our little dehydrated meal together and sleeping on a pad this thick, and isn't it awesome? But that morning, I could tell I was getting shaky, and I thought, all I have to do is let the air out of my air mattress. Couldn't do that. Okay, I'll load my stuffed bag with food. Couldn't do that. And the anxiety just kept mounting and mounting, like in the movie there. You know, it starts going. Can you relate with that? And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to walk over to this other clearing, because bless my husband's life, he's lived with me now for 44, almost 45 years. And the majority of it, we've had depression and anxiety on board with us. And I mean, sometimes you just get burned out helping someone, right? I get burned out of helping myself sometimes. I'm like, I get mad at myself. And I was mad that morning. Walked to another clearing, couldn't get it managed. Did my breathing, did all my interventions that I help my clients with every day. That's why I can be a therapist, because I know what it feels like. But brothers and sisters, I get it. And finally, I felt it kind of calming down. But my critic was after me. Like, here you are, hijacking what you love the most. Why are you doing that, my critic? And then, finally, a little light filtered in from my higher power. And it was this. Do you remember that this is the way I'm doing my work through you? Do you remember we've had this conversation that this is going to be on your plate probably for the rest of your life? I'm like, yeah, 38 years is a long time, and I'm going to live till I'm 100. So yeah, we got a lot further to go, God. And then the thought that I tell my clients all the time is that the struggle is where the strength comes. I'm like, yeah, I've told my clients that 100 times. And then I thought of that great Christian missionary in the New Testament, Paul, who had a thorn in the flesh. And he asked God 3 times. We don't know what his thorn in the flesh was. Something troubled him. I asked God thrice that it might be removed. And God said, my grace is sufficient for you. And my strength is made perfect in your weakness. I'm like, oh yeah. Thanks for these reminders. But I was still kind of bugged. God does not remove the trials, but he helps you deal with them with grace when you humbly submit. Do you know how I would feel to wake up and never have anxiety? Think of the things I could be doing without being hampered of that, but also think of how God has used you with your weakness, with your struggle, or your loved one, or your teenager, whoever's struggling, whatever brought you here. And then I sat on this tree stump, and I was kind of in a clearing with tall trees around, and I was finally able to get that. Can you kind of feel when your anxiety kind of starts to dissipate a little bit? I'm like, I'm regulating, and there's an entire science on our nervous system, and we could talk about that for like 72 sessions. I love it. Just how we can help our nervous system relax. And so I just looked around at all of these towering pine trees, and one word came to my mind: beloved. That I was beloved of God. And I just said that word as I looked around. And then I thought, I have a power in a man named Jesus, who was the most beloved, who carries our sorrows and our pains. If you have a higher power, call on it. If you don't, find your other internal resources. Dr. Schwartz still doesn't belong to any church. But he did say in a workshop 3 years ago, I came to learn that there is a spiritual part to all human beings. And I'm like, we have 3-year-olds in my congregation could tell you that. I am a child of God. But I mean, it was really cool coming from a very strong, empirically based scientific basis. We have both a spiritual and a physical part to us. So here are some, oh wow, we have a bit to do. Okay, let's just go faster. We have 5 minutes. Oh, I was going to do Q&A. Okay, so the slide deck will be there. Here are some things that your internal core self, different worldviews. Yoga has a name called chakra. Chinese philosophy calls it qi. Western world, we call it spirit. In Christianity, we might call it the soul, our eternal spirit, our spirit being, the part that receives the Holy Spirit, our spiritual self. One client called it her celestial self. Every part, everyone has a self. Here's some things to help with your identifying, connecting with your core self. We've done some meditation and some mindfulness. The breath is one of the most regulatory functions of the body to help bring you down when you're in a heightened state. And sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it's taken me 2 or 3 hours to really regulate myself. But over time, I've gotten much better at it. Prayer, communicating with your higher power, being in holy places, being with people who lift and love you, nature, service, wisdom, humility, awareness, developing and sharing your natural talents, and practice. Helping others. Dr. Sue Johnson, who founded the type of couples therapy I do, we are wired for connection from the cradle to the grave. We need each other, and COVID did a number on that. Mental health needs just soared. The practice where I work, hired new therapists, created a second room, break room, and a second bathroom, so we could help people with that isolation and the mental health that developed from that. Okay, we have a couple minutes. Questions?
I was just, if you have time, maybe we can ask hers first, but I just wanted to flesh out this bus thing a little more, that the core self is driving the back to the other ones. Like, what do you do when they're acting up? Like, you kind of talked about that a little bit, but if there's time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like being aware that the parts are there, being aware that one is unruly or misbehaving, such as my experience on the backpacking trip. Oh, wow, anxiety just popped up, and not only did she wake up on the back seat, she hauled down to the front and hijacked my bus. And so everything that I did in that was helping to calm her down and reassure her. And that particular thing is tied to my exiles of separation anxiety because of trauma in my early childhood. My mom had to go to kindergarten with me, thanks very much, for a long time. And so understanding, getting to a depth of why is this part doing what it's doing with that curiosity. Good question. One more question. The same one. Okay. One more question. Oh, we have 4 minutes. Yes, speak loudly.
A little bit of a shift from what you were saying, but you talked about how sometimes there's that trauma that's so buried so deeply.
Yes.
Is there a need to actually visit that at some point? Or if it's there and it's not triggering, is it okay to leave it alone for the sake of that healthy trajectory?
Thank you. I had a client, and I speak just very generally, so I'm not revealing any much too personal information, who came in for marital therapy, and this couple rocked it. Like in 12 sessions, they did sometimes what takes other couples 2 or 3 years. They were just so on it. But one of the partners said, I do have trauma from the crisis and chaos of my life. And so I referred her to one of our other therapists who does EMDR, which is a trauma therapy. And just yesterday he said she is just identifying so much. So this is what I say: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sorry for the slang. If it's not causing a problem, it's okay. But if in moments like I mentioned with the PTSD, flooding it back up and just hijacking your life, derailing your bus, it's time to pay attention to that. And I did EMDR back in '94 when it was brand new, and it was like a game changer. Literally, I'd been 10 months, and then we did 6 sessions, and it just like, oh, whoa. So guess what? I'm not a bad person, which was a core belief from childhood. I mean, duh. But it was like I was free to choose to love myself. I was like, it just literally like a path opened up in my brain. I am not defined from my trauma. It impacts me. It will throughout the rest of my life. I have to be aware of it. When people get angry, when people raise their voice, man, I just felt it right now. I have to watch. And it's really hard for my family to not ever raise their voice around me, but we have to work with that. So hope that answers. Thank you. You have been fantastic. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And if you have questions, my email and office number is there. Happy to support and help. And God bless you as you help yourself and other people.